Welcome home to USA Global TV and Radio. Ours is a place where dreams take flight, voices are heard, and stories are shared. This is where cultures meet, connections are formed, and ideas are transformed into action. This is your destination for authentic storytelling, diverse perspectives, and meaningful conversations. We're where global stories unite and bridges are built beyond all borders. Discover our world of education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. Together, we're building bridges worldwide. Subscribe to our USA Global TV channel and download our USA Global TV app. Be our guest or join our team. Visit usaglobaltv.com. With heartfelt thanks to our executive producer, Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck, music scored by Yifei Tang from Cloud Road Music, creative direction by Paul Garcia, and I'm Al Cini, and I'm very proud to be part of the USA Global TV and Radio family. So join us here at USA Global TV and Radio. Make us your home for global connection. All rights reserved. This video and its contents are the exclusive property of USA Global TV and Radio. Unauthorized use, duplication, or redistribution in any form is strictly prohibited. Thank you for being a part of our global community. Let's inspire together.
Can a powerful, moving story be the foundation for a successful business, or is it the other way around? Today, we're going to explore storytelling to becoming a CEO, everything that we need to know about writing and publishing and artificial intelligence. Welcome to Ahead for Business. Joining me today is my dear friend, mentor, and co-host, Mr. Al Cini, who is the co-founder of Profit for Teams. Let's welcome him to the program. How are you, sir?
It's, I'm doing just fine. And we're talking about one of my favorite, I'd say, literary genres, which is science fiction. I have been called a nerd both to my face and behind my back. So here's a chance. Today is a chance to talk a little bit about that. I'm really excited about that.
That's fantastic. And as you know, I've written 26 books so far, I think. So I have some knowledge. I'm waiting for you to write your first book. I don't know what is going on there. I'm going to keep harping on you. But we have a guest who comes to us from Creative Edge and Mickey Mickelson, our dear friend. His name is Edward Willett. And not only has he written his own books, not only does he do his own podcast, but he also has a publishing company and has published a huge amount of books in 1 year. We're going to get to that for other people. Let's welcome Ed to the program.
Great.
Hello, nice to have you.
Nice to be here.
Morning, Ed.
You certainly have accomplished quite a lot in your career. And so our topic today is really moving from a storyteller to a CEO. And we were chatting backstage about the fact that many people will write a book without the idea of actually being a business owner. They might just think it's a hobby. I've got something I want to share. What are your thoughts about the significance of actually looking at writing and publishing as a business?
Well, I think if you want to do it full time, you have to think of it as a business. And for me, I started as a newspaper reporter and photographer, but I always knew the reason I went into journalism was because I knew I wanted to be a writer. So I was planning that a very long time before I actually became a freelance writer. So I worked for several years as a newspaper reporter and then editor. And I was editor of my local newspaper at the age of 24. And then I worked at the Saskatchewan Science Center here in Regina as a communications officer. But all of that was practicing for when in 1993, I became a full-time freelance writer. And immediately that made me a business. And then, of course, the challenge with all businesses is how do you keep it going and how do you make a living at it? And although my first love has always been writing science fiction and fantasy, I wasn't immediately selling it, just short stories here and there at the time. And so I began writing anything, everything. I did some writing on a outdoor wildlife documentary series here in Saskatchewan for a while. And I would write for anybody that wanted me to write. And that's basically what you have to do as a freelance writer, is be willing to take on projects that maybe are not within your immediate love. At least this is how I had to do it. So absolutely anything. But the training I had as a journalist had taught me that if you ask questions and do your research, you can write about anything, even if you don't know anything about it up front. You have to learn about it. So the other thing that I've learned as a writer is that you have to be learning all the time. And my first book was not even a novel. My first published book was using Microsoft Publisher for Windows 95, published by Q, I think the company was called. And basically, I just saw, I think it was on CompuServe. It was so long ago, as you can tell by the title, that somebody was looking for a writer, that this company was looking for writers. And I auditioned basically and got it. And my second book was using Microsoft Publisher for Windows 97. So I was kind of stuck in that kind of thing for a while. And the novels didn't come along. My first novel didn't come out till 1997, I guess. Yeah. And it was with a very, very, very small publisher, but it was a start. And then since then, I published a lot of novels, but I still will write absolutely anything, uh, almost anything. I should qualify that a little bit. If someone asks me to and is willing to, pay me.
Oh, great. And, I'm going to want to, I am personally, because I like this stuff, I'm going to want to talk to you about science fiction and fantasy and in general, and whether it's commercialized to the point where now it's being ruined, kind of the way country music has been ruined. But I want to talk to you about that, because I think it's an important area of literature that maybe has been spread a little thin. But we'll talk later. For now, though, I want to hear from you about Shadowpaw Press. Is it just science fiction, or what kind of authors do you publish?
Well, yeah, Shadowpaw Press had an interesting beginning. I started it in 2018 because I had finally, after many years, collected enough of my own short fiction that I thought I could put together a collection. And I was just going to self-publish it. But I talked to a local publisher, Heather Nichol at Your Nicholsworth Publishing, and she said, "No, you should start your own publishing company." And as I keep saying, I haven't thanked her properly for that yet. But that's how it started. And then I also had my grandfather-in-law. This is his house we live in. Some of his books are still on the shelf back there. The First World War memoirs of my grandfather-in-law, Samson J. Goodfellow. He had written those late in life, and I thought that'd be a good book to bring out. So I had two books that I wanted to bring out, and they were the first Shadowpaw Press titles. And I got the First World War memoirs out just in time for the centennial of the armistice in 2018, which was good timing. I got front page coverage in the local newspaper by timing it just right. But after that, for a while, my focus was actually on my own books, which had come back to me because I had metaphorically killed a number of publishers. They would publish me and then they'd go out of business. I don't think it was my fault, but that's what happened. So those rights came back to me. I was putting out new editions of things like Spirit Singer, which had won a Saskatchewan Book Award and stuff like that. And then I was writer in residence at the Saskatoon Public Library, and I encountered a book there called Thickwood that I thought deserved publishing. And I said, if you'd reach out to me, I might, publish it in my little publishing company. And it did come to me. Somebody else that I knew, another writer, Matt Hughes, had a young adult book he was looking for a home for, and he asked me if I'd be interested, and I said okay. And also through the podcast, The World Shapers, where I was interviewing other science fiction and fantasy authors, I developed an anthology series. I heard somebody give a presentation at the Sask Books annual meeting about kickstarting an anthology, and I thought, I know some authors. And so I invited my first year guests to contribute stories to an anthology. That was the first Shapers of Worlds anthology. And it had people in it like John Scalzi and David Brin and Joe Haldeman and Tanya Huff, very, very well-known people that I'd interviewed in the podcast were willing to contribute either a reprint or a new story. So all of a sudden I was publishing other authors. And I wasn't just publishing science fiction. Thickwood is a historical novel that combines the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, a league of their own, with raising horses in Saskatchewan. It's about a young woman who played in that league and then came back and wants to raise horses. And even the young adult book from Matt Hughes, although he writes science fiction, was not science fiction. It was an outdoor adventure tale set in Alberta. So I realized I was open to just about anything. And since then, Shadowpaw Press does publish a lot of science fiction and fantasy because that's my first love. But it also it's published poetry, it's published nonfiction, it's published literary fiction, literary short story collections, one picture book. It's very eclectic.
It's great.
A question I have for you that relates to what you shared in the beginning, that you are an entrepreneur and a business owner. for decades at this point. And there are people out there right now going to work every day, dreaming of what it would be like to run their own schedule. Ed, would you go back if you had the opportunity today to give it all up and say, you know what, it's too much to run your own business. It's too much sacrifice and too much responsibility. Would you go back and work for someone else?
Well, I have worked for other people, in contract positions over the years. I worked for the city of Regina because somebody was on adoption leave and they needed a communications officer. That was shortly after I became a freelancer. But being a freelancer, it's always, even if you're in a contract position, you're still in charge because the contract can end, or you could say, okay, I'm done and go back. It's still not quite the same as a full-time job. And as I said, I haven't had one since 1993. And the contract position at the city was full-time, but that was only for 6 months or something like that. But I don't think I could go back now. The freedom, yeah, there's a lot of pressure, and you've got to have work, and you've got to keep looking for work, and you've got to try to sell the work that you produced in the case of an author or a publisher. But I love it, and I don't think, well, at this point, I'm at retirement age. Nobody would hire me anyway. So I'm not going back. I will say, however, that I remember when because I knew as a teenager, I wrote 3 novels in high school. I knew I wanted to be a writer. And I remember I was reading in like Writer magazine and Writer's Digest and stuff. And I think I don't remember who it was that said it, but there was an old definition of a freelance writer as a man with a typewriter and a working wife. And I do have to give a shout out to my wife, who's a professional engineer. So that certainly helps on the household income.
That's great. Good.
The team effort. Thank you.
That is, Dr. Jacalyn, you raised such a great point when you asked the question, would you go back to working for somebody? Because no matter who we are, whatever level we achieve, we're always working for somebody. There's always somebody we're serving. So as a publisher, I'm imagining Ed serves the authors and the readers and the audience who consume the material. And so you're always responsible to somebody. And managing that responsibility, I think, is a key part of being successful in publishing, isn't it, Ed?
Yes, and you're quite right. When I do a lot of editing. I edit. Even if I'm not the developmental editor, I've occasionally hired an editor to work on a particular title. I do all the copy editing. So every book that comes through, pretty much, with a couple of exceptions, I have gone through and done all the editing. And when I'm editing, I'm trying to serve the author as well as me as the publisher. If I've decided to publish the book, my editing is focused on making the author's voice as clear as possible by, correcting infelicities and phrasing or bad punctuation or whatever it might be. Paragraph breaks. I'm big on better paragraph breaks when I'm editing, but that's all in service to the author. And you're also in service to the reader, because the whole point is to produce books that people want to read. It's easy to produce a book that nobody wants to read. There's not much point, because books have to have readers. So yeah, I think that's very fair. It's like the Bob Dylan song in the 80s, you got to serve somebody.
Yeah,
Ed, in our audience, we have people who potentially have written books, or they're thinking of writing books. They own a business, and people can go to Amazon and they can self-publish. What's the advantage of going to Shadowpaw Press and working with a publisher like yourself as opposed to self-publishing?
Great question.
That's an interesting question. When I started, Shadowpaw Press, except for being a title, Shadowpaw Press, was not that different from self-publishing, because my outlets were not just Amazon. I have always done wide ebook releases, but print on demand. So through Ingram, Spark, and through Amazon KDP, which, your book is out there and it shows up in bookstores worldwide through Ingram. Doesn't mean anybody's going to buy it, and bookstores don't necessarily buy a lot of books that are published through Ingram Spark that way. But then I got a small distributor, and I think what a publisher usually offers is that distribution of some sort, where they actually get books distributed, hopefully to bookstores, so that people who aren't buying all their books online also find them, or schools or libraries are more likely to bring them in. And so I always worked toward that. It took a while to get there, but I'm now a member of Literary Press Group Canada, and through LPG, which is a collection of smaller publishers mostly smaller publishers. Well, some are much, much larger than me. I'm about as small as they get. But across Canada, I'm distributed by a company called Lit Distco, which is one of the main book distributors in Canada. They also distribute into the US, although it's not as big a part of their operation. And then I also have, through LPG, I now have a sales force, which is always an interesting thing to me, that there are people who are going out to bookstores, and they're connected with a major public, what do we call them, public relations? I don't know if you call them that, marketing, I guess, Manda Group it's called. So that's what I bring to someone whose book I publish, is that it's getting proper distribution. It's got a sales force going out to bookstores and saying, here's a book, and they have a sales meeting. They decide which ones they're going to focus on and which ones they think will do really well. And it does make a huge difference in the number of books, with some exceptions. There are people who are self-publishing who have sold more books than I will ever sell in my life, or ever have sold in my life, even with 60 books. But they're like, bolts of lightning seem to hit those people, and everything works that way. The vast majority of self-publishers aren't selling a lot of books. And I'm kind of a step up from that. And you also have the fact that you've got, you're not paying for editing. I look after the editing. You're not paying for cover design, all those costs that you have to put into a book. If you're self-publishing, a traditional publisher will look after.
That's all great reasons for people to reach out to you, Ed. And if they're thinking about writing a book, working with you, rather than it's more than just printing it. And I think when you mentioned distribution, a lot of people, I think, overlook that step.
Yeah, and it's the major thing. And 12 of my novels were published by Daw Books, which is one of the major science fiction fantasy publishers in the States, and was for a long time. I don't think they're still published. They're bought by Astor Publishing. I don't know what their distribution is, but they were distributed by Penguin Random House. So I was used to that level of distribution. I can't match that in my little publishing company, but it's still it's solid, and it depends on the author. I've had now 4 books from Robert J. Sawyer, one of the big names in science fiction. And as soon as I had one of those, my sales go.
Yeah, all of a sudden.
A lot of it comes down to the actual author often. So even if you're published by a traditional publisher, Rob is a most amazing promoter of himself and his books. He's at conventions all the time. He does speeches. He's out there constantly. And so if you can build that kind of platform as an author, that's actually a very attractive thing for a publisher when they see that.
When you were talking, Ed, I started laughing when you mentioned Ingram Spark, because I happened to look at my report from last month, and there were 2 sales, and I thought, who are these 2 people? Where are they? It's amazing. 2 books were sold. It's crazy, because even though you put your books on Ingram Spark, they're not going to actually be in the bookstore unless someone comes in and asks for them. That's my understanding. And then books start out in the front. I guess they're from the New York Times, whatever the hardbacks, the ones that have the most sales, and then eventually things get moved. But what about someone who is self-published? Can they then come to you and say, hey, I'm really not cutting it doing what I'm doing. Can you help me with distribution and marketing?
I would never suggest I can help anybody with marketing, because I always say that the one thing I remember from I remember many things from my journalism classes at university, but I had to take a public relations course, and two things I remember from it. One was don't lie to the press, which I think is largely ignored. And the other one is 90% of public relations is wasted, but nobody knows which 90% it is, which applies to marketing too, because, I've done print ads, and I've done Amazon ads, and I've done Facebook ads, and it's hard to tell if anything works. So I'm not going to give anybody advice on marketing. There's lots of people out there who can give better advice than I can. However, on the distribution side, I don't do it through Shadowpaw Press. I do have a sister company called Endless Sky Books, and that's more of a publishing services company. So I'm still very picky about what I take on there, but that's more of the hybrid model, where the author will put in money to cover, in this case, I would say it would cover the print costs and whatever editing costs there are, in exchange for getting 75% of the proceeds when it goes. And I can still offer distribution through Shadowpaw Press. For distribution purposes, Endless Sky Books is an imprint of Shadowpaw Press. I've done a few that way. I tend to put my own books out that way, and then I don't even necessarily put them into distribution. I'm still doing print on demand and ebook versions of books that either have never been published, and I thought I'd still like to put them out there or have were published and the rights came back to me. But I do offer that as well. And through Endless Sky Books, I also offer freelance editing and all those sorts of things when I have time. The trouble is that I very seldom now have time to take on too many projects.
I want to talk a little bit about science fiction because it happens to be a kind of a favorite of mine, and I grew up with it. I'm a senior guy, and I remember some of the yeah, there we go. And I remember some of the greats, and I'm sure a lot of those greats kind of inspired you as a young author back in the day to jump in with your own contributions in that area. But I wanted to ask you, in particular, starts out with very little appetite among the readers and a few authors, and then the appetite grows, the demand grows, those authors become more prolific, other authors join the field. Over time, the whole, let's say, world universe of science fiction grows and evolves to a point where there's a lot of appetite for it these days, but I don't know that there's a whole lot of nourishment in the field.
Well, it's like, well, again, there's a version of what I said about public relations that, of course, is a famous science fiction saying, which is called Sturgeon's Law, which is that, of course, 90% of science fiction is crap. 90% of everything is crap. It's Sturgeon's Law. So that hasn't really changed. There are nuggets. The thing that happens now, of course, is that there is so much out there, thanks to self-publishing, that, you can look at books that apparently have sold lots of copies on Amazon. You've never heard of the author, and you have no idea if they're, something you want to read or not. So I don't know if it's so much that there isn't any nourishing science fiction out there as that it's been diluted by the flood of material that's out there. And of course, once upon a time, you could literally read every science fiction book published. And you can't do that anymore. So you go back to those days of, Robert A. Heinlein and Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke, the big three who are certainly Andre Norton, Robert Silverberg. Those are the people that I most remember and were influenced by as a young reader. And you could read everything that was in the field pretty much if you put your mind to it. And then Star Wars came along. That had a lot to do with it, I think. And the field exploded. And but I don't think it's that there's not great stuff out there. I think it's just harder to find.
Oh, that's great. That's good to know.
Thank you, Ed. When it comes to artificial intelligence on Amazon KDP, you have to provide whether or not you've used AI. The same thing on Ingram Spark. And I recently was doing a keynote, and someone asked the question that this person just wrote an entire book using AI, and was that okay? So not there to give any judgment, but you have to declare that you're using AI. What happens if a person doesn't declare? Do we have any idea what are the ramifications?
Well, actually, and Mickey Mickelson, from Creative Edge, my publicist who hooked us up here, recently posted something that he'd heard from an author who failed to do that declaration on Amazon, and their Amazon KDP account was shut down completely. Like, their books are gone. They don't even get any royalties that are still owing to them from the sale of these books. And in that case, it wasn't even, if I remember the details, it wasn't even a book that was entirely written by AI. It was just that they had used it in some fashion and they had failed to declare, and Amazon had discovered that. So there are some guardrails there. Amazon will let you sell an AI written book, but you have to tell them that it's AI written. And the big problem there is passing off something that's AI written as something that was written by a human. And it's getting increasingly difficult to tell. I'm doing some freelance work that has involved a lot of looking at AI output. And, they're getting pretty darn good. The more you look at it, the more you kind of get a sense of when you're reading something that's AI written, but there's no guarantee. And I even put one of my own short stories into one of the models. It wasn't an AI detection system. It was just one of the chat models. And I said, would you say this is AI written? It absolutely wasn't. I wrote every word. It was in Shapers of Worlds Volume 5. And the response actually came back, oh, yes, this is AI written. And the reason was it was too well written to have been written by a human. Okay, I don't quite know what to do with that information. I'm not going to write worse so that AI systems think it's written by a human. But Yeah, and it is a problem. I'm currently working on an anthology called On Spec 2026 New Canadian Literature, the Fantastic. I took over the On Spec brand from a long-running magazine that ceased publication in December. They asked me if I'd take it on and kickstarted this anthology. And all I can do is put into the, when you send it to me, you have to declare that you did not use AI to write this story. That's all you can do. You can guess. And there have been cases where people have been dinged for AI writing and they absolutely swear it wasn't. And so you can end up with people suffering serious consequences when in fact they're telling the truth, but people don't believe them about using AI. And it's changing so fast and the models are getting so strong and so powerful and so much better that I think, and there does not seem to be any software solution to telling if something is written by AI, because all it's doing is creating a string of words. There's nothing telltale in there in the way of coding or anything. It's out there, and I will not knowingly publish an AI written book. I don't care if they used it for brainstorming or however the many other useful ways you can use AI. And yet, at some point, it's going to be, I won't actually know. You just have to trust that the author is telling the truth when they say it wasn't.
So, I want to follow up on that because I know that you've written a whole bunch of books and all of them came out of your head and none of them were written by artificial intelligence. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your library, your authorship library, the books you've written and what you tend to write about and what matters to you as an author.
Oh, well, discounting the stuff I wrote for hire, like I wrote a series of biographies of people like Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix and stuff like that. Did a lot of educational books. But when I write fiction, it's always science fiction and fantasy pretty much. I started writing young adult. My first 3 or 4 books were all young adult. And then I got picked up by DAW. So for several years, I was writing adult science fiction and fantasy. I've always kind of gone back and forth. Also not just under my own name, under E.C. Blake for DAW, I wrote a trilogy called The Masks of Agrima, which was fantasy. And then I got back to my own name with a science fiction novel, The City Born. So it kind of went back and forth. And I wrote one under the pseudonym Lee Arthur Chang called Magebane. So I've had 3 pseudonyms. And I don't know. I think, oddly enough, I asked AI to look at my books and see what themes it recognized. And this was Grok, and it told me, I thought it was pretty good. It said I tend to write about ordinary people who suddenly find themselves in extraordinary circumstances. They may be living in a science fiction or fantasy world, but they're ordinary people, and then something changes and they're thrust into something where they have to make decisions, important decisions, and take actions that will, hopefully make things better. I can say that generally because in books, nothing works out the first few times. They make things worse, and then they make things better if they're lucky. So there's that kind of an idea quite a bit in my work. And I think that's kind of the main thing. That's kind of my definition of heroism. It goes back to reading about Frodo, the ordinary hobbit that finds himself thrust into extraordinary circumstances. And in the end, even though he doesn't, in a sense, he fails, but it's heroism up to that point that leads to the success. And I think that's always been my definition of heroism, is the ordinary person thrust into extraordinary circumstances and doing something extraordinary as a result. And I think that probably is the one sentence description of my typical output.
When we were just reviewing your website, one of the things that really drew me in were your book covers. How do you get them selected? Do you create them yourself, or you work with another team of people?
It varies. I mean, every book has a different artist, and I have used AI in book covers, usually just for my print-on-demand stuff. I hire artists occasionally. I have a connection to a few that I've used now that I will use again and again. It just varies on the book. Of course, my own covers from other publishers, I had no say in who they use for the cover. In the case of DAW, I was fortunate in that I was usually given an opportunity to review the cover before it was finalized. That is not necessarily the case. Most publishing contracts say that it's the publisher's responsibility to do all of that, and you may or may not get a chance to say, I really hate it. And there's entire panels at science fiction conventions with authors talking about bad book covers. So, But I think generally I've been very pleased with the ones I've either created. Sometimes I've used, you know, what do you call it? Stock. That's the word. Stock images through Shutterstock. I've created a number of covers that the authors were thrilled with, and that got compliments from other people. So I do have an eye for it. I had an art minor, so I do have a design element in my background as well. I used to be an editorial cartoonist of all things.
Oh, good.
So yeah, I don't know. I think I have an eye for it. And so whether I create it or somebody else creates it, I can usually say, yeah, that'll work, or I don't think that'll work. There are covers I would like to have back and redo and might at some point, but you can't win them all.
What do you hear from your readers? I mean, what are some reviews you've gotten that you're particularly proud of?
Lots of my books have had great reviews, and the books I publish as well. Reviews are always nice. You can't live or die by them. Lots of authors won't read reviews because you can get, like, one of my books on Goodreads. There are people on Goodreads who kind of go around looking for books to slam, and then they have a following. People love to read their 1-star reviews of some poor bloke's book. I got one of those on actually my best-selling book, so I probably didn't have any impact on the sales, but it was a 1-star review. It was the first thing that showed up on Goodreads, and it stuck there because this person had a following. So when you go to Goodreads, you see this awful 1-star review is the first thing you see. But that's the negative side. On the positive side, it's always nice when something that a book that I never found a home for, which I just put out myself through the Endless Sky Books imprint, the Haunted Horn. I think we scrolled by the cover when you were looking at the website there. I just had this glowing review from an award-winning YA author who writes reviews here in Saskatchewan, and how wonderful it was. And I thought, yeah, take that, all you publishers that didn't do it when I was it. So that does really give you a nice sense that maybe you know what you're doing. And this is a bit selfish as well, but I edit my own stuff, and it still gets award nominations, and which I think is for me as an editor, that makes me feel that if I can edit my own stuff and do a good job, I can edit your stuff even better because I'm that one step further removed. So that's very gratifying as well when I get a positive review on something that I both wrote and edited. But also just from the Shadowpaw Press side, it's always great if a book is nominated for awards. I had a young adult science fiction novel I published called The Headmasters by Mark Morton, won a major award from the Canadian Children's Book Centre this year. I think it was $5,000 for the author. So that's always gratifying as well, because I edited that and I chose to publish that. And that gives you that little bit of maybe I do know what I'm doing.
It sounds like it. One thing I just want to touch on is, especially for people who are business owners, I know there's a whole psychology of why we can write books, why we do write books. Maybe it's because we want to get rich, maybe because we want the credibility. But I know for myself, I use my books as a business card. And instead of giving the business card, I sign the book and I give it to the person. And I really believe, I haven't done any research on it, but I can, that when you give someone a book and they see your name on it, you've signed it to them, they're going to remember you, as opposed to giving them a business card, which may or may not end up in the circular bin. So I will give my books away for free without asking for anything. People might say, well, can I value you? No, that's okay. I want you to have it. So that's the philosophy that I use, the psychology behind why I write books. And also if I'm invited to do a keynote, I might write a book for that. So what are your thoughts about what I'm sharing for business owners who could use a book that they've written as a way to be remembered?
That sounds like a great idea. Again, it comes back to why you wrote the book, I guess. For most authors, they're not going to give away the books because that's how they make money, is by selling the books. But as a business person who has written a book, or, I've written books for like the Saskatchewan Mining Association, or I wrote the history of the Association of Professional Engineers and Geoscientists of Saskatchewan, which I just love saying. My wife is past president, so, and I wrote the history book of the Saskatchewan Land Surveyors Association, and those aren't businesses, but they're associations. And those books certainly got handed out freely as a way to communicate, here's what our organization is about. And I think the same thing applies to a business owner. If my business was a little different, and I have given away books just to promote myself. If I had some books that, were an old edition that I'm not selling anymore, but they're still they're a great giveaway that I've done at book tables and things like that. And I think you're absolutely right. It's certainly memorable when you get a book directly from the author and it's been signed. And if they give it to you as well, you're going to remember that person. And maybe you'll read the book, but whether you read the book or not, you're going to remember that person. You're going to look at the bio. You're going to remember where you heard that person speak and what they were speaking about. So it's a great way to cement that in somebody's head. And hopefully the book also gets read, because ultimately the real reason for writing books is to communicate with readers.
Well, that's, I know we're coming up on the end of the program. We mentioned a little bit in a kind of a brief pre-interview before we went on the air we talked a little bit about writer's block. And I know that for Ed Willett, on any given morning, there's publishing to be done, there's writing to be done, or there's Netflix. How do you manage that choice?
Writer's block simply doesn't exist for me, except in the narrow sense that sometimes I feel like I don't have time to do the writing I need to do. And I think it goes back to being a newspaper reporter and editor. When I started my career, I was 20 years old. I had my degree in journalism, came back to my hometown newspaper, the Weyburn Review in Weyburn, Saskatchewan. And, you had work to do. You went out and you covered things. You took notes. You had to write the story and get it into the paper. It was a weekly, but still, I wrote, sometimes 3 feature articles a week where I was interviewing people. I had a weekly column pretty soon after I started that carried on all the time I was there. You had to sit down at the keyboard and work because that was your job. And as a freelance writer, that's still your job. So I do, as I pull back a little bit, as you mentioned, I put out 20 books a couple of years ago, which is way too much for one person and a cat. I'm surprised he hasn't showed up actually for the podcast. Cutting that back to a more reasonable amount that I can maintain then gives me more time to get back to my own writing, because writing has always been my first love. The publishing came along and I'm happy that I'm doing it and I'm proud of what I've done with it. But at my heart, I'm still a writer. So my writer's block takes the form of having so much pressure coming at me from the publishing side, which is like a fire hose of stuff that comes at you all the time, to make it more difficult to sit down and write. But as soon as I sit down at a keyboard, if I'm in writing mode and I start typing, I never just sit there and say, I can't type. I could just sit down and type and words will come and they may turn into something. I usually plan a little more than that, but it works. And I think it's like a muscle that you exercise. You exercise your writing muscle. And anytime you need to write, you're able to sit down and write.
That's, Dr. Jacalyn, you're always bothering me about why am I not writing my book? And what I have to do now, based on what Ed just told me, is find my settings, click on the icon, go to writing mode, and turn that on.
That sounds reasonable.
That's pretty much it.
Sounds like a good start, Al.
Okay.
Ed, I want to thank you for being here today and bringing some focus into the value of storytelling, and also how business owners can be storytellers who actually are benefiting from sharing their stories. And you not only are your own writer, your own author, you're also a publisher distributing other people's content, and you're a podcaster. Who's a good person to reach out to you, and how would you like them to do that?
Oh, you can just go to my website, edwardwillett.com, and you can contact me through there, or through publisher shadowpawpress.com, or through theworldshapers.com. They all have contact information on them. And I get all the emails from all of those sources, and I will see it if you reach out to me. Just don't sound like you're an AI written marketing scheme, because I'm getting about 6 or 7 of those every day from people, AI written stuff purporting to be from somebody that wants to do something with my book. So, sound like a human being. That will help, but I will get it if you come through any of my various websites.
All right. Thank you very much. We have shared your websites as well as your Facebook. And so for people who are listening later, when this becomes a podcast, you'll be able to see all the information in the notes. Ed, thank you so much for being here. We wish you the best and look forward to seeing you on a future program.
Thanks so much for having me. It was fun.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
All right, Mr. Cini, what are your key takeaways from the show today?
Well, he, as an author in science fiction, which I'm not, which Ed is, obviously, he talked about the importance of heroics. I mean, the science fiction and fantasy, I mean, all stories are built around role models that people can emulate. Most, the really good ones are. Lady Ella, The stories of the listening mentor, the animals, the animals in the barnyard who do it well or not do it so well. Those stories are all about inspiring people who read those stories to become better people by learning from the role models that those stories present. That's really true in science fiction. It's kind of a running theme. And, what I pull from that is that the real appetite in the world out there among readers is looking for that role model that can inspire them to be more than themselves. I think that's the real contribution authors offer into the world of publishing, you and Ed included. So I got a lot from that. And I also got the sense that you don't have to be huge to be successful. You can be successful at any scale where success is defined as making a dent in the universe, however large that dent might be. And I think Ed offered a lot there, and I think he was a great guy to talk to. It was a great interview. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. And you just mentioned role models, and you are an expert when it comes to that and helping people with teams and rowing in the same direction. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do with ProFit for Teams?
Sure. Thank you for that. That's, in talking with Ed, I also mentally started to build an answer to the question that I figured you were probably going to ask before the end of the program. What we've learned in our experience and based on our research is that really successful teams are built around role models. When you get a group of people that are really successful, that are working very effectively on something, and you ask them to visualize the role model that their team becomes when it's doing its best work on its best day, you get very similar descriptions from everybody as a member on the team. You get essentially the shape of an answer, who are we, which is more important ultimately in building a team or an organization than just the two obvious questions, who am I and who are you? So answering that question, who are we, by representing a team as a role model is what we try to do with ProFit for Teams. Based on learning theory, everything that we are as human beings is learned by observing other people. And that's role models 101. And our job with ProFit for Teams is to try to, I don't want to say weaponize that, but for certain kinds of teams, yeah, that's a great word for it, to try to put that to work so that teams become more effective and more proud of the work they do. And they do their work with more joy and more happiness and more satisfaction and more self-fulfillment. And I also do want to say, talking to Ed, I learned that your team isn't just you and your cat and your significant other working together. It's the authors that you work with if you're a publisher, the readers that you work with if you're an author. Everybody in your ecosphere is a member of your team, whether they're directly doing the work or directly benefiting by it. So that larger view of what a team is, I think, is an important part of our value proposition. So thank you for the opportunity to talk about that, Doc.
Thank you, Al. I appreciate all the work that you're doing at ProFit for Teams, and I really enjoy this time that we spent together. I think we both got a lot of value from having Ed on the program, and
Definitely.
I want to thank you, and I look forward to seeing you on our next episode.
I can't wait. Thanks, Doc.
Thanks. Bye for now. For those of you who are wondering, where can you watch us on a regular basis? Because we are on many different platforms. I suggest that you go to our YouTube channels, where we have earned the YouTube Silver Creator Award for over 100,000 subscribers on USA Global TV and Radio. And Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck, which we started a couple of years ago, we now have over 40,000 subscribers. So please, we'd love to have you join us. And as we close out today, I want to share with you one of the things that I really am passionate about, which is stop giving away your value, boundaries, pricing, and the business of respect. And this is a book that I wrote to help everyone out there who is continuously saying, yes, yes, I'll do it, of course. And you go home and say, why did I do that? Or you're giving all your services away. You're undercharging for your services. And then at the end of the year, you're wondering why you didn't make any money. Stop giving away your value. Take a look.
How much of your value have you been giving away? Saying yes when the answer should have been no? Lowering your price to secure the opportunity? Giving more while receiving less? Over time, it adds up. Until one moment brings clarity, you've been giving away your value. This is not about working harder. This is not about doing more. It's about boundaries, It's about pricing. It's about respect. From Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck comes a direct and necessary message. Stop over-delivering. Stop underpricing your expertise. Stop negotiating against yourself. Because when you recognize your value, everything changes. Stop giving away your value. Boundaries, pricing, and the business of respect. Available now wherever fine books are sold and on Amazon. A film by USA Global TV and Radio. Executive producer Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck. Videographer and cinematic production Paul Garcia. Voiceover by Ed Wargas. Stop giving it away. Start owning it. What if many of the problems we associate with aging are not random? What if there are identifiable causes behind declining energy, chronic disease, and memory problems? We have been told that aging is simply something we must accept, that slowing down is normal, that growing older means growing weaker. But what if that's only part of the story? Why do some people remain active and engaged well into their later years? Why do others struggle with disease, fatigue, and declining health? What is happening beneath the surface? What processes drive aging? In Aging Sucks, researcher, educator, and author Red O'Loughlin explores what researchers have discovered about why we grow older. No medical degree required, no confusing jargon, just clear explanations of what researchers have discovered about the processes that influence aging. You cannot stop aging, but understanding its causes may help you make better decisions about your health, your future, and your quality of life. Because understanding comes before action. Action creates hope. Aging sucks. End the guesswork. There is hope.
Thank you, viewers and listeners of USA Global TV and Radio, for joining us today. We're honoured to have your time and attention as part of our global community. At USA Global TV and Radio, we believe in the power of authentic conversations, meaningful connections, and creating a world of possibilities together. Want to be part of something bigger? Join our team of elevated listeners at usaglobaltv.com, a space where your voice matters and your ability to listen transforms relationships. Stay connected with us across all our platforms for thought-provoking discussions, expert insights, and empowering stories. Subscribe to our channels at youtube.com/c/usaglobaltv. Follow us on social media and explore the endless opportunities we're creating for growth, learning, and inspiration. Together, we're not just broadcasting, we're building bridges and changing lives one conversation at a time. For inquiries, contact us at info@usaglobaltv.com. Produced by Executive Producer and Director Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck. Voiceover by Mike Porter. Creative direction by Paul Garcia. All rights reserved. Visit usaglobaltv.com to view our full terms and conditions.